Okay, let's just dive right into this explainer. Have you ever looked at a masterful drawing of a human figure and just felt totally overwhelmed by the complex anatomy? Well, it turns out capturing the body isn't actually about raw talent. It's about simplifying all that chaos into basic, manageable geometry. Today, we're going to break down the exact formulas and proportions that let you turn a blank page into a living, breathing figure using primitive 3D shapes like simple cubes and eggs. Here's a quick look at what we're covering today. First, the quest for perfect proportions. Second, using heads as a yardstick. Then, balance, posture, and contrapposto. Fourth, simplifying with basic shapes. And finally, the key landmarks of the body. All right, let's kick things off with part one, the quest for perfect proportions, a brief history of measurement. You know, humanity hasn't always measured the body the same way, and the evolution of these artistic rules actually tells us a lot about history. Way back in the 31st century BC, the ancient Egyptians literally used the fist as their standard module. They'd measure exactly 18 fists from the ground straight up to a figure's hairline. Fast forward to the 5th century BCE, and the Greek sculptor Polykleitos totally shifted the paradigm. He established this concept of symmetria, or harmonious proportions, but he used the head as the ultimate yardstick. And this progression eventually culminated in 1492 with Da Vinci's famous Vitruvian Man, striving for that perfect, cosmic, geometric ideal. Now, you might be thinking, isn't applying strict math to art kind of restrictive? Honestly, no, not at all. As this quote points out, these historical systems aren't meant to be rigid chains. They're actually really helpful shortcuts. A canon of proportions is basically just a rule of thumb that frees up your cognitive load. So instead of constantly guessing where an elbow goes or getting bogged down rendering super complex muscles, you can just trust the simple shapes and focus on the true expression and the actual message of your artwork. Okay, take a look at the number 0.604. There's this huge, really popular myth out there that the ideal human figure has its navel resting exactly at the famous golden ratio of 1.618, right? And people constantly cite Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man as proof of this. But actually scratch that. If you really look at Da Vinci's math, the navel in his drawing divides the figure at exactly 0.604. It's just a great reminder that while art definitely relies on math, we really shouldn't force magical numbers where they don't actually exist in the historical text. Moving right along to part two, using heads as a yardstick, the foundational metric. So the really crucial point here is that while an average person walking down the street is roughly 7.5 heads tall, artists routinely manipulate this. If an artist wants an impression of grace or nobility, they'll often stretch the figure to a clean 8 heads tall. But to create those towering gods and superheroes we see in comic books, they used a heroic proportion of 8.5 heads. And interestingly, most of that extra height doesn't come from a longer neck. It almost all comes from a dramatically larger chest and much longer legs. If you're blocking out an ideal 8-head figure, mapping these specific head unit milestones is an absolute game changer.